wanted to know more about issues surrounding the Violence Against Women Act. So Carolyn Adams sat down with Julie Goldscheid, a professor at the CUNY School of Law. Goldscheid is an expert on domestic and gender-based violence and has argued before the Supreme Court.
25 years later, what are the areas that the Violence Against Women Act has been most effective?
The funding in VAWA has been transformative. It has directed a lot of money to services for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking. And it's, even from the beginning, has changed our law in many ways that's been really important. So, for example, for undocumented women who are in abusive relationships, it's created a path through which they could get citizenship without having to rely on abusive partners, both transitional and emergency shelter. In creating a core of lawyers throughout the country who now are able to represent survivors in family court, which is really a critical service. But of course, the law, as you know, has also been subject to critique. It was passed as part of the 1994 crime bill, and it directed a good amount of funding to criminal justice services. So many advocates wanted that, but many advocates also wanted a heavier emphasis on social services, prevention, legal services, and other approaches that have been incorporated into the law through each reauthorization.
What are the major objections that some Republicans have about the current iteration?
The Republicans have objected for a few reasons. And I'll just say that each iteration of the law has included input and incorporated input from the field to try to meet survivors' needs better. So one of the things that this iteration would do would be to close the so-called boyfriend loophole. There are provisions in VAWA that would take away the ability for people to keep their guns if they were convicted of violations of domestic violence laws. But those laws didn't cover boyfriends. They only applied to people in other forms of recognized relationships. So this version that's pending in Congress now would close that loophole, and it would also apply to misdemeanors, not just felonies. The NRA, as you wouldn't be surprised to hear, has opposed this. And so a number of people in Congress has gone on the record as opposing it for that reason. One of the provisions that was really controversial in the last reauthorization was a historic provision that prohibits discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender survivors. And that, as you probably know, has been really controversial, and it's been on the books, but it remains controversial to this day.
How does VAWA currently help people who are from the LGBTQ community, trans women in particular?
Of course, you know that trans women are disproportionately represented in people who are subjected to gender-based violence. So that's been really important. And the anti-discrimination provision helps assure people that they can't be discriminated against in the services that they seek because they're lesbian or gay or trans.
And in 2012, you co-authored an article that said that VAWA doesn't go far enough. Do you still see it that way? And if so, what more is needed?
I mean, there's a whole other approach to services than criminal justice when we know that many, many survivors are not going to call the cops, even if they do the best job they possibly could, because of things like fear of arrest, fear of immigration consequences, fear of having their children taken away. So we need a broader range of services to address the problem.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and your insights.